Tom Hartwell raised the knife over Ben's chest. Eleanor's finger trembled on the trigger. One wrong move and she'd kill the man she loved, but if she didn't shoot, Tom would. The men separated for half a second. She fired. But this story didn't begin with a bullet. It began with a cage, and a man who'd forgotten how to live. The wagon wheels ground against frozen earth, each rotation marking another mile into Colorado territory. Benjamin Wright sat rigid on the driver's seat, reins loose in calloused hands, watching his breath cloud white in the December air. Behind him, 5 daughters huddled beneath wool blankets, their chatter a familiar music he'd stopped hearing 3 years ago. He was 38 years old and felt 60. The town of Dust Creek appeared on the horizon like a wound against winter sky. Wooden buildings clustered together as if sharing warmth, their shadows long in afternoon light. Ben had come for fence posts and feed, nothing more. Another task on an endless list of tasks that filled his days but never filled the hollow place where his heart used to be. Catherine had been gone 3 years. The grief hadn't dulled. He'd just learned to function around it the way a man learns to walk with a broken leg that never healed right. The cage sat in the center of town square. Ben saw it from 100 yards out. At first his mind registered it as empty, just another piece of frontier brutality, the kind of thing towns use to punish drunks or petty thieves. Then the wagon drew closer, and he saw movement inside. Something alive. Something human. His hands tightened on the reins. A woman, curled into a space barely large enough for a dog. Her clothes were thin against the cold. Her face was pressed against iron bars. Her eyes were open but empty, the look of someone who'd already died and was just waiting for their body to catch up. Ben had seen that look before, 5 years ago in Kentucky when he was still a deputy sheriff, when he still believed the law could protect people. "Papa," Rose's voice cut through his thoughts, 5 years old and still innocent enough to ask the questions that mattered. "Papa, why is that lady in a cage?" The words hit him like a fist to the chest. Catherine's voice echoed in his memory clear as if she were sitting beside him instead of 3 years in the ground. "Promise me you'll keep living, Ben. Don't let grief kill you." He'd promised, but for 3 years he'd been a liar. Ben pulled the wagon to a stop 20 feet from the cage. Around him, townspeople moved with deliberate indifference, their gazes sliding past the iron box and the woman inside as if neither existed. A group of boys threw snowballs at her face. She didn't flinch, didn't move, just took each impact with the stillness of something already broken. "Stay here," Ben said to his daughters. He climbed down from the wagon, his boots crunching on frozen ground. The woman in the cage lifted her head as he approached. Her eyes met his, and something in Ben's chest cracked open. Not pity, recognition. He knew this woman's story before she spoke a word. He'd failed to save women like her before. Ben knelt beside the cage, bringing himself to her eye level. The iron bars were thick-built to last. The lock was heavy. The woman inside was dying. "How long?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. Her lips moved. No sound emerged at first, then barely a whisper. 4 days. 4 days. In December, in Colorado territory where nights dropped below freezing. Water food. A cup yesterday. Nothing else. Ben stood, rage building in his chest like pressure in a boiler. He turned toward the land office where a man in a star-shaped badge leaned against the doorframe watching with cold amusement. Sheriff Pike. Ben had met a dozen men like him in his 12 years wearing a badge. Small men who found power in cruelty and called it justice. "This your doing," Ben's voice carried across the square. Pike pushed off the doorframe and sauntered closer, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Sure is. Caught her begging 3 days back. This is how we handle vagrant trash in Dust Creek. By locking human beings in cages to freeze to death. She's a beggar, probably a thief. We're teaching her a lesson about coming to towns where she don't belong." Ben looked back at the woman. She wasn't a thief. Everything in her eyes said victim, not criminal. In his years as a deputy, he'd learned to read the difference. "How much?" The words came out before Ben could stop them. Pike blinked. What? How much to let her out? A slow smile spread across Pike's face. You want to buy yourself a vagrant right? That what this is? I asked a question. Pike's gaze shifted to the wagon where 5 girls watched with wide eyes. His smile turned ugly. $20, though I'm surprised you need to buy company with 5 daughters to keep you warm at night. Ben moved faster than thought. One moment he stood 3 feet away. The next his forearm pressed against Pike's throat, pinning the sheriff against the land office wall. Pike's eyes bulged. His hands clawed at Ben's arm. Watch your mouth, Ben said, his voice deadly calm. Those are my daughters you're talking about. Pike tried to speak. Ben pressed harder. Name your price, right now, or I break your neck right here in front of your whole town. The crowd that had been ignoring the cage suddenly found them very interesting. Faces appeared in windows. People stopped in the street. Ben didn't care. The rage in his chest was 3 years old and finally had a target. 20, Pike choked out. 20 and she's yours. Ben released him. Pike stumbled forward, gasping for air, one hand going to his bruised throat. You're crazy, Pike spat, crazy as a kicked dog. Ben pulled money from his coat pocket, counted out $20 in bills and coins, held them toward Pike without looking at him. Open the cage. You're making a mistake. When she robs you blind or runs off with your silverware, don't come crying to me. I said open it. Pike's face twisted with fury, but he pulled a key ring from his belt, stomped toward the cage, jammed the key into the padlock with more force than necessary, and yanked it open. Fine, take her. But when she brings you nothing but trouble, remember I warned you. Ben moved to the cage. The woman inside tried to shift forward, but her body wouldn't cooperate. 4 days folded into that cramped space had left her muscles useless. She managed to move a few inches before everything gave out. Ben reached in and lifted her free. She weighed almost nothing. Through her thin dress he could feel every bone in her spine. Starvation. Real starvation, not the romantic kind from dime novels. The kind that hollowed a person out from the inside. I've got you, he said quietly. You're safe now. Her throat moved, trying to form words. What came out was something between a sob and a gasp. Ben carried her to the wagon. His 5 daughters scooted back to make room, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. Maggie, 13, and 2 grown up for her age, immediately reached for blankets. Charlotte watched with wary eyes but said nothing. Dorothy stared with the intensity of someone cataloging every detail. Alice and Rose pressed close, offering wordless comfort the way children do. Papa's got you, Rose whispered, patting the woman's hand. Don't be scared. Ben settled the woman among the blankets, his daughters wrapping her in warmth like a cocoon. He climbed back into the driver's seat and gathered the reins. Wait just a minute, Pike started. Ben didn't turn around. We're done here. You came for fence posts and feed right, not some vagrant. I changed my mind. He snapped the reins, and the wagon lurched forward. As they rolled out of Dust Creek, Ben looked back once. Sheriff Pike still stood by the empty cage, his face twisted with something between rage and confusion. The townspeople had already gone back to their business, the woman in the cage already forgotten now that she was gone. Ben faced forward again and focused on the road. Behind him he heard Maggie's gentle voice introducing herself and her sisters, heard the woman's whispered thanks, heard Rose chattering about their new house and how it had a big fireplace, and Mama's quilts before Maggie quietly corrected her that Mama was in heaven now. Ben's hands tightened on the reins. Catherine would have stopped. Catherine would have never driven past that cage. She would have torn it open with her bare hands if necessary. She'd always been the brave one, the good one. Ben had just been the man who loved her. For 3 years he'd been moving through life like a ghost, feeding his daughters, clothing them, keeping them safe. But not really there, not really present, just going through motions while the best part of him rotted in a grave in Kentucky. Today, for the first time since Catherine died, he'd acted instead of reacted. He'd made a choice that wasn't about duty or obligation, but about what was right. He didn't know if that made him brave or just tired of being afraid. The wagon rolled west along a road that cut through snow-covered prairie. 2 hours to the homestead at Miller's Creek. 2 hours while winter sun traced its arc toward the mountains. 2 hours while a woman who'd been in a cage for 4 days slowly remembered what warmth felt like. His daughters took care of her without being asked. Maggie produced a canteen and instructed the woman to drink slowly. Charlotte positioned herself as a windbreak. Dorothy sketched something in her small notebook, glancing up every few seconds. Alice peppered the woman with questions in a gentle voice. Rose simply curled against her side, sharing body heat. Watching them, Ben felt his chest tighten. Catherine's lessons lived on in these 5. Kindness wasn't weakness. Compassion wasn't foolishness. Help where you can, when you can, how you can. He'd been so focused on keeping them safe that he'd forgotten to teach them to live. "Thank you." The woman's voice drifted forward, hoarse but clear. "Thank you for stopping." Ben didn't turn around. "Don't thank me yet. We've got 2 hours of riding ahead, and I can't guarantee the girls won't talk your ear off." Rose giggled. "We're being helpful, Papa." "I know you are, sweetheart." The woman spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why did you stop? Everyone else just walked past." Ben was quiet for a long moment, watching the road unroll before them. The sun hung low now, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. Beautiful. Catherine would have loved this light. "My wife," he said finally. "She died 3 years ago. Cholera took her in 4 days." He paused. "She was the best person I knew, kind to everyone, especially those nobody else cared about." "I'm sorry about your wife." "Me too." Another silence. Then Ben added, "If she were here today, she would have stopped, wouldn't have even hesitated. I've spent 3 years trying to be half the person she was. Today I think I finally did something she'd be proud of." Rose piped up from the back. "Mama's in heaven. Papa says she's the brightest star." "That's beautiful," the woman whispered. "She watches us." Rose continued with the certainty of a child. "Papa told us. She's right up there next to the moon." Ben's throat tightened. He'd told them that story one night when Rose couldn't sleep, when she'd asked if Mama could see them anymore. He'd made it up on the spot, trying to give a 5-year-old some comfort. But Rose had believed it with her whole heart, and somehow that made it feel true. "She must have been an amazing woman," the stranger said. "She was," Ben agreed. "The best I ever knew." The wagon rolled on in comfortable silence after that. Ben listened to the creak of wheels, the rhythm of hooves, his daughters' soft voices as they talked among themselves. Normal sounds, family sounds. Sounds he'd stopped really hearing after Catherine died. He was hearing them now. The homestead appeared as the sun touched the western mountains. Logs and stone, modest but solid. Smoke curled from the chimney where he'd banked the fire that morning. The barn stood dark against the snow horses moving in their stalls. Home. He'd built it with his own hands after they moved west from Kentucky. Every nail, every board, every stone, placed while his daughters played nearby, and grief sat heavy on his shoulders. "We're here," he announced. The girls scrambled down from the wagon, their energy seemingly endless despite the long, cold ride. Ben moved to help the woman, but she was already trying to stand on her own. Her legs buckled immediately. He caught her before she fell. "Easy," he murmured. "Take your time." She leaned against him, finding her balance. "I can walk." "Maybe, but let me help anyway." Together they made it to the house, Ben supporting her weight while she took careful steps. Inside, warmth hit them like a wave. The fire had held. The house smelled like wood smoke and the rabbit stew he'd left simmering that morning. His daughters scattered to their tasks without being told. Maggie headed for the stew pot. Charlotte stoked the fire. Dorothy disappeared toward the back bedroom. Alice and Rose stayed close to the stranger, ready to help however they could. Ben guided the woman to a chair by the fireplace. She sank into it with a sound that might have been relief or pain or both. The heat brought color to her pale cheeks, but it also made her shiver harder as her body remembered what warmth was supposed to feel like. "Girls," Ben said. "Charlotte, get that stew on the table." Maggie, fetch clean clothes from your mother's trunk. Dorothy, heat water for washing. Alice, Rose, stay out of the way. They moved like a well-trained unit. After 3 years of motherless life, they'd learned efficiency. Ben crouched beside the woman's chair, bringing himself to her eye level again. Up close he could see the toll 4 days had taken. Cracked lips, bruises from the cage bars, eyes hollow with exhaustion, and something darker. Trauma he'd learned to recognize it during his years in law enforcement. "I don't understand any of this," she said quietly. "Why you paid for me? Why you brought me here? Someone should have stopped that cage 4 days ago. I couldn't change that, but I could change what happened next. You don't even know me. I know you were treated worse than an animal by people who call themselves Christians. I know that's wrong. That's enough for now." Maggie appeared with a bundle of clothes. These were Mama's. They might be a little big, but they're clean. She held them out. "They're yours now. Mama would have wanted you to have them." Ben's chest tightened. Catherine's clothes. He'd kept them in a trunk, unable to give them away, but unable to look at them either. Now Maggie was offering them to a stranger with the same casual generosity Catherine herself would have shown. The woman took the bundle with trembling hands. "Thank you. I'll take good care of them." "You don't have to," Maggie said simply. "They're yours." Charlotte brought a bowl of stew. "Eat slow. Papa says if you eat too fast when you're real hungry, it makes you sick." The woman took the bowl and just held it for a moment, letting warmth seep through the ceramic into her frozen fingers. Then she took one bite, then another. Tears ran down her face as she ate. Ben stood and moved to the window, giving her privacy for her emotion. Outside, darkness was falling fast. Stars were beginning to appear. The brightest one, the one Rose always called Mama's star, hung just above the eastern ridge. "Catherine," he thought, "I don't know what I'm doing, but I think you'd approve." "There's a bedroom at the end of the hall," he said without turning around. "Small, but it's private. You can stay there as long as you need." "I should work," the woman said. "Earn my keep." "We'll talk about that tomorrow. Tonight you rest." "Mr. Wright?" "Ben," he corrected. "Call me Ben." Maggie stepped forward. "I'll show you to your room. I left clean towels on the bed and the water's warm if you want to wash." Ben watched his eldest daughter lead the stranger down the hall. 13 years old and already so much like her mother. Too much responsibility on young shoulders, but she bore it with quiet strength. After the bedroom door closed, Ben sank into his own chair and stared at the fire. His other 4 daughters gathered around him, sensing his mood. "Is she going to stay, Papa?" Alice asked. "I don't know, sweetheart." "I hope she does," Rose said. "She seems nice." "She smells like snow," Dorothy added, then blushed when Charlotte elbowed her. Charlotte watched him with older, more knowing eyes. "Are you okay, Papa?" Ben looked at his second daughter, 11 years old and already learning to read silences the way her mother had. "I'm okay," he said, "just thinking. About Mama. Always about Mama." Charlotte nodded. She understood. They all did. The ghost of Catherine Wright lived in this house as surely as the 6 living people did. Later, after the girls had gone to bed, Ben sat alone by the dying fire. The house settled around him with familiar creaks and sighs. This was usually his time, the hours between his daughter's sleep and his own, when he could finally let the mask slip and just be a man drowning in grief. Tonight felt different. Tonight he'd acted. He'd seen something wrong and he'd fixed it, or at least started to. For the first time in 3 years, he'd done something that wasn't about survival or duty or keeping promises to a dead woman. He'd done something because it was right, and it scared the hell out of him. Because caring meant vulnerability. Action meant consequence. Helping meant responsibility. And Ben had spent 3 years building walls specifically to avoid all of those things. But the walls were cracking now. He could feel them starting to crumble. He thought about the woman sleeping in his back bedroom, thought about the cage, thought about Sheriff Pike's casual cruelty, and he thought about something else, something that had been nagging at the edges of his mind since he'd looked into that woman's eyes. He'd seen that look before. 5 years ago in Kentucky when he was still Deputy Sheriff Benjamin Wright, when he'd been investigating a man named Victor Hartwell. The memory hit him like cold water. Victor Hartwell, a businessman from Denver who'd come to Kentucky on what he called a business trip. But Ben had noticed things: women disappearing, indenture contracts being bought and sold, whispers of establishments where those contracts were used for purposes that had nothing to do with honest labor. Ben had investigated, against orders against his sheriff's explicit instructions to leave well enough alone, because Hartwell had money and connections and judges in his pocket. Ben had spent 3 months gathering evidence, testimonies, contracts, proof of abuse. He'd worked with his partner, a federal marshal named William Hayes, to build a case that would finally bring Hartwell to justice. They'd planned a raid. June 15th. They were going to arrest Hartwell and shut down his entire operation. Then on June 10th, Catherine fell ill. Cholera. It came out of nowhere, struck like lightning. One day she was fine, laughing in the kitchen while she made dinner. The next day she was in bed with a fever. The day after that, she could barely speak. 4 days from healthy to dead. Ben had stayed by her side. Hayes had begged him to come on the raid anyway, said they needed him. But Ben couldn't leave, couldn't let Catherine die alone. On June 14th, Catherine had gripped his hand with what little strength she had left. "Ben," she'd whispered, "promise me you'll keep living. Don't let grief kill you. Promise me." He'd promised. She'd died the next morning, June 15th, the same day Hayes and his team attempted the raid without Ben. And Hartwell had escaped. Someone had tipped him off. He'd fled to Colorado Territory before they could arrest him. The operation had collapsed. The women they'd hoped to free remained trapped. Justice had failed because Ben hadn't been there to see it through. 2 failures, 2 guilts, 1 crushing weight. He'd failed to save his wife from disease. He'd failed to bring Hartwell to justice. And for 3 years those failures had eaten him alive. Now sitting in his homestead in Colorado Territory, Ben wondered. That woman in the cage, the terror in her eyes, the way she'd flinched at sudden movement, the look of someone who'd been owned and hurt and broken. Was it possible? Could Victor Hartwell be here? In Colorado, still operating his network of cruelty and calling it legal business. Ben stood and moved to the window. Outside, stars filled the sky. Catherine's star burned bright above the ridge. Tomorrow he would ask the woman her story. He would find out who she was running from and why. And if the answer was what he suspected, if Victor Hartwell's shadow had found its way to this remote corner of Colorado Territory, then Ben would have a choice to make. He could send the woman away, protect his daughters from whatever storm was coming, keep his head down and his family safe, or he could do what he should have done 3 years ago. He could fight. Ben pressed his forehead against the cold glass and closed his eyes. "Catherine," he thought, "if you can hear me, if you're really up there among the stars, I need to know. Am I supposed to help this woman? Am I supposed to face Hartwell again? Or am I supposed to protect our girls and let the past stay buried?" The stars offered no answer. They never did. But somewhere in his chest, in that hollow place where his heart used to be, something stirred. Not quite hope, not quite purpose, but something that felt like waking up after a long, dark sleep. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Ben woke before sunrise as always, made coffee, started breakfast, moved through the familiar rhythms of a man who'd been alone for 3 years despite being surrounded by children. The woman emerged from the back bedroom as the sun cleared the mountains. She'd washed and changed into Catherine's clothes. The dress hung loose on her thin frame, but she moved with more strength than the night before. Food and warmth had done their work. "Morning," Ben said. "Coffee." "Please." He poured her a cup. She took it with both hands, savoring the warmth. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I have in months. Years, maybe." She paused. "I should tell you my name. I'm Eleanor. Eleanor Grace." "Benjamin Wright, but people call me Ben." "Your daughters are beautiful, Ben. You've raised them well." "They're raising themselves mostly. I just try to keep them fed and safe." Eleanor smiled. It transformed her face, made her look younger. "I think you do more than that." The girls thundered in from their bedroom, still half asleep, but already noisy. They greeted Eleanor with the casual warmth of people who'd already accepted her presence. Rose climbed into her lap without asking. Alice chattered about a dream she'd had. Dorothy showed her a new sketch. Maggie and Charlotte set the table with practiced efficiency. Ben watched it all and felt that strange stirring in his chest again. After breakfast, after the girls had scattered to their chores, Ben and Eleanor stood alone in the main room. Morning light slanted through the windows, painting everything gold. "I need to know," Ben said, "who you're running from." Eleanor's face went still. "Why?" "Because I'm going to help you, but I need to know what we're facing." She turned away, arms wrapped around herself. "You can't help me. No one can." "Try me." A long silence. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, "His name is Victor Hartwell." The floor seemed to drop out from under Ben's feet. "Victor Hartwell from Denver." Eleanor spun around, eyes wide. "You know him?" Ben's hands clenched into fists. 5 years. 5 years of guilt and grief and unfinished business. And now it had walked right into his home. "I know him," Ben said, his voice deadly quiet. "I investigated him 5 years ago in Kentucky. I tried to bring him to justice. I failed." "Then you know what he is, what he does. Tell me your story, all of it." Eleanor told him. About St. Louis 3 years ago, about being a seamstress falsely accused of theft when her employer needed a scapegoat for his own embezzlement, about the trial where she had no lawyer and no one believed her, about the sentence, 5 years of indentured servitude, about Victor Hartwell buying her contract at auction, about 2 years in one of his establishments in Denver. Not quite a brothel, not quite a factory, but something worse than both. A place where women were property and protests were met with violence. About Tom Hartwell, Victor's younger brother, the enforcer, the one who kept the women in line through fear and brutality. Eleanor lifted her sleeve. On her left shoulder a scar, deliberate, precise, a punishment and a warning. "Tom did that the first time I tried to escape, to make sure I wouldn't try again." Ben's vision went red at the edges. He'd seen scars like that before, in Kentucky, on the women who'd managed to escape Hartwell's network before Ben's investigation had collapsed. "But you did try again." 6 months ago. There was a fire, small, quickly contained, but in the chaos I ran. I've been moving west ever since, doing odd jobs, trying to stay invisible. Her voice broke. "I thought if I got far enough away, if I kept my head down, maybe he'd forget about me. Maybe I'd be free. But you're not free. Under law, you still belong to him." "Yes." The word came out like a sob. "Under law, I'm his property. If he finds me, he can take me back, and no one will stop him because the contract is legal." Ben moved to the window. Outside, his daughters were doing their morning chores, feeding chickens, hauling water, living innocent lives in a world that had no idea how dark it could be. "Eleanor," he said, "I need to tell you something." He told her about Kentucky, about his 12 years as a deputy sheriff, about the investigation into Hartwell's trafficking operation, about the evidence he'd gathered and the raid he'd planned, about Catherine's death and his choice to stay with her, about Hartwell's escape and the guilt that had followed. "So you see," he finished, "this isn't just your fight. This is mine too. Hartwell took something from me 5 years ago. Not directly, but the guilt of letting him escape, of failing those women, it's been eating me alive ever since." Eleanor was crying now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about your wife. And I'm sorry I brought this to your door." Ben turned to face her. "You didn't bring anything. This was already here. Unfinished business. A debt I owe to the women I failed to save." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're not going back. I'm saying Hartwell doesn't get to win, not this time. He has the law on his side, Ben. He owns judges and sheriffs and men with guns. Then we'll change the law, or break it. I don't care which." For the first time since he'd met her, Eleanor looked at him with something other than fear or gratitude. She looked at him with hope. "You really mean that?" "Every word." She crossed the room and took his hands. "Why?" Why would you risk everything for me?" Ben thought about that, about Catherine and her promise, about 3 years of grief and guilt, about the hollow place in his chest that had started to fill the moment he'd knelt beside that cage. "Because someone should have stopped 4 days ago. Because I failed women like you before. Because my daughters are watching and I want them to see their father do what's right no matter the cost." He squeezed her hands gently. "And because for the first time in 3 years I feel like I'm actually living instead of just surviving. You gave me that. The least I can do is fight for you." Eleanor pulled him into an embrace. He held her, feeling the tremors of her crying against his chest. This wasn't romantic. This was two broken people finding strength in shared pain and shared purpose. When she pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "What do we do?" "First, we make you legally free. I went back to Dust Creek yesterday while you were resting. Paid Sheriff Pike another $20 to sign over your contract to me." He produced papers from his coat pocket. A bill of sale. Eleanor Grace's indenture contract transferred from the custody of Sheriff Pike to Benjamin Wright. "This is legal." "Legal enough. Pike was happy to take the money and wash his hands of you. As far as Colorado law is concerned, your contract belongs to me now." He took out a second document, a certificate of manumission already signed. "And I'm releasing you, effective immediately. You're free, Eleanor, legally and completely." She stared at the papers, hands shaking. "But Hartwell won't care. He'll say Pike had no authority to sell my contract. He'll come for me anyway." "I know. That's why we prepare." The front door burst open. Maggie stood there, face pale. "Papa, there's a rider coming. Fast." Ben moved to the window. A lone horseman approached from the east, riding hard. Even from a distance, Ben could see the dust cloud behind him. "Girls," he said, his voice calm despite the tension in his shoulders. "Inside. Now." They obeyed without question. Ben checked his rifle, loading it with quick, practiced movements. Eleanor watched with wide eyes. "Is it him?" "I don't know, but we're about to find out." The rider pulled up in the yard. Not Tom Hartwell, just a courier, young and nervous. "Looking for Benjamin Wright," he called out. Ben stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "That's me. Got a letter for you, from Denver." The courier tossed an envelope onto the porch and rode off without waiting for a response. Ben picked it up. Expensive paper, elegant handwriting, a Denver return address. He opened it, read the contents, felt his blood turn to ice. Eleanor appeared at his elbow. "What does it say?" Ben handed her the letter. Watched her face go white as she read. The letter was simple, direct. A businessman's ultimatum dressed up in polite language. Victor Hartwell knew where Eleanor was. He knew she was with Ben. He demanded her immediate return. He threatened legal action for theft of his property. He hinted at violence if his demands weren't met. And at the bottom, a deadline. 7 days. "He found me," Eleanor whispered. "How did he find me so fast?" Ben thought about Sheriff Pike, about the courier who'd known exactly where to deliver the letter, about how easy it would be for a man with money to buy information from a corrupt small-town sheriff. "Pike sold us out. Probably sent word to Denver the same day I bought you out of that cage." Eleanor sank onto the porch steps. "It's over. He's going to come for me and there's nothing we can do." Ben looked at the letter again. 7 days. Hartwell was giving them time to think, to make the smart choice to give Eleanor up without a fight. But Ben had spent 3 years making the smart choice, 3 years playing it safe, 3 years letting fear dictate his actions. He was done being smart. "No," he said, "it's not over. It's just beginning." He called his daughters together, sat them down in the main room, looked at each of their faces, so young and trusting and brave. "Something's happening," he said. "A bad man is coming. He wants to take Eleanor away from us." Rosa's little face crumpled. "No, she's ours." "I know, sweetheart, and we're not going to let him take her. But that means we might have to fight. Things might get dangerous. I need you all to understand what that means." Maggie, his eldest, squared her shoulders. "What do you need us to do?" "Papa." Pride swelled in his chest. 13 years old and already so brave. "I need you to trust me. I need you to protect each other. And I need you to be ready to run if I tell you to." "We're not running," Charlotte said fiercely. "We're family. Family doesn't run." Ben looked at his daughters, looked at Eleanor, looked around the home he'd built with his own hands. 7 days. He'd failed Catherine. He'd failed those women in Kentucky. He'd failed to bring Hartwell to justice. But he wouldn't fail this time. This time he would stand. He would fight. He would protect what was his and damn the consequences. "You're right," he said to Charlotte. "Family doesn't run, so let's get ready." That night, after his daughters were asleep, Ben sat on the porch with Eleanor. Stars filled the sky. Catherine's star burned bright. "You could still leave," Eleanor said quietly. "Take the girls and go. Start over somewhere else." "I could, but I won't." "Why not?" Ben thought about Catherine's last words, about the promise he'd made, about 3 years of existing instead of living. "Because I made a promise to my wife, to keep living, to do what's right, and for 3 years I've been breaking that promise." He looked at Eleanor. "You woke me up, reminded me what it feels like to have purpose, to fight for something, even if it costs you everything. Especially then, that's when it matters most." Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. Not romantic, just two people finding comfort in shared resolve. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for fighting for me. Thank you for giving me something to fight for." They sat in silence watching the stars. 7 days felt like both forever and no time at all. Somewhere in Denver, Victor Hartwell was planning his next move. Somewhere closer, Tom Hartwell was probably already riding west with hired guns. But here in this moment, Ben felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. He felt ready, ready to fight, ready to protect, ready to finally finish what he'd started in Kentucky, ready to live up to the promise he'd made to a dying woman who'd seen more good in him than he'd ever seen in himself. The hollow place in his chest wasn't empty anymore. It was filling with purpose and fury and determination. Victor Hartwell had taken too much from too many people. He wasn't taking Eleanor, not while Ben Wright still had breath in his body. The stars wheeled overhead indifferent to human struggles. Catherine's star shone bright, and Ben Wright, for the first time in 3 years, felt truly, completely alive. The attack came at midnight, 48 hours after the letter arrived. Ben had been awake for most of those 2 days, catching sleep in brief snatches while maintaining a watch rotation that his body remembered from 12 years of law enforcement. The skills came back easier than he'd expected. Reading terrain, setting perimeters, planning defensive positions. The instincts of a deputy sheriff didn't die just because a man hung up his badge. He'd strung cans on fishing line around the property. Simple early warning system. The kind of thing that worked because most people didn't expect it. At 12:15, the cans rattled. Ben was on his feet before the sound faded. His hand found the rifle he'd kept loaded and ready by the door. 2 more rifles positioned at windows, ammunition distributed, escape route planned to the root cellar 50 yards behind the house. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "get the girls. Root cellar. Now." She moved without question. 3 days together, and she'd already learned to trust his tone. The urgency beneath the calm. The first torch came through the front window. Glass shattered. Fire bloomed across the wooden floor, hungry and bright. Ben counted muzzle flashes in the darkness outside. 6 guns, maybe 7. Professional spacing. These weren't farmers or cowboys. These were men who knew how to fight. Tom Hartwell had come prepared. Ben returned fire. Not wild shooting, but calculated, aiming to pin them down, force them to cover, buying time for Eleanor to get his daughters to safety. A voice cut through the night, deep, cruel, amused. "Benjamin Wright, send out the woman and we leave refuse and we burn you out." Ben's response was a single rifle shot that kicked up dirt near where the voice had come from. The message was clear, No negotiation. Outside he heard horses screaming. The barn. They were torching the barn. Ben's heart tore. Those horses weren't just livestock. They were family assets. Transportation. The difference between survival and starvation in this territory. But more than that, they were living creatures that depended on him. The tactical decision came fast and cold. Save the daughters or save the horses. There was no real choice. "Go!" he shouted to Eleanor, who stood frozen in the doorway. "Get them out. I'm going for the horses." He saw her face, saw the terror, saw her nod and turn herding 5 girls toward the back door. Maggie carrying Rose, Charlotte gripping Dorothy's hand, Alice clutching Eleanor's dress. Ben ran for the burning barn. Smoke hit him like a fist. Heat pressed against his face, stealing breath. The horses were screaming that high-pitched sound of animal panic that cut through everything else. 3 stalls on the left, 2 on the right. 5 horses total. He released the first 3. They bolted past him, eyes rolling white with terror, hooves thundering as they fled into the night. The last 2 were trapped. A fallen beam blocked their stalls. Fire licked at the wood close enough that Ben could feel his skin blistering. He tried to reach them, tried to move the beam, but it was too heavy and the fire too close. The horses screamed. Ben's hands pulled at burning wood. Blistered. Bled. But the beam wouldn't move. Another beam fell, this one between Ben and the trapped horses. The decision was made for him. He stumbled backward, choking on smoke, and fled the barn just as the roof collapsed. The sound of those horses dying followed him into the night. Gunfire still crackled from the house. Ben could see figures moving in the darkness. Tom's men trying to flank the position. But the house was empty now. Ben had nothing left to defend except his own life. He worked his way around to the root cellar using cover and darkness. Found the door. Pulled it open. 5 daughters and Eleanor stared up at him from the darkness below. Their faces were pale in the distant firelight. Rose was crying silently into Maggie's shoulder. Charlotte had her arms around Dorothy. Alice gripped Eleanor's hand hard enough that her knuckles showed white. "Papa," Maggie whispered, "the horses." Ben's throat closed. He couldn't speak, just shook his head. Understanding passed through Maggie's eyes. At 13, she was old enough to know what that headshake meant. Old enough to see the burns on her father's hands. Old enough to understand that some things couldn't be saved no matter how hard you tried. The gunfire was dying down. Tom's men had figured out the house was empty. In moments they'd start searching. "We have to move," Ben said. "Now." He led them through the darkness using terrain he knew by heart. Behind them, their home burned. The barn was gone. The house would follow. Everything they owned turning to ash and ember. But they were alive. All 7 of them. That was all that mattered. The 3 surviving horses waited where Ben had told Eleanor to tie them earlier, part of his contingency planning. Always have an exit. Always assume the worst. 7 people, 3 horses. They'd have to ride double and triple. Ben lifted Alice onto the first horse, then swung up behind her. Rose went on his back, clinging like a monkey. Charlotte rode the second horse alone. She was the best rider among them. Maggie and Dorothy shared the third horse. That left Eleanor. "With me," Ben said, extending his hand. She swung up behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist. He could feel her trembling. Or maybe he was trembling. Hard to tell with adrenaline burning through his veins. They rode into darkness as behind them the homestead burned bright enough to light the whole valley. Tom Hartwell's voice carried on the wind. "Run right, but we'll find you." Ben didn't look back. Looking back wouldn't change anything. They rode for 5 miles before anyone spoke. 5 miles of frozen night air and the smell of smoke in their clothes. 5 miles, while the girls held on to each other and tried not to cry. Sarah Fletcher's boarding house appeared like salvation. A single light burning in the window. Sarah herself standing on the porch as if she'd been expecting them. She probably had been. News traveled fast in frontier communities. Fire that big would have been visible for miles. "Inside," she said simply. "All of you." Sarah Fletcher was a woman in her late 40s who'd survived her own share of hardship. Widowed young. Lost her only child to fever. built a boarding house from nothing, and kept it running through sheer will. She asked no questions, just ushered 7 traumatized people into warmth and safety. Ben collapsed on the porch steps after his daughters were inside. The adrenaline was wearing off. His hands hurt. His lungs hurt from smoke. His heart hurt from the sound of horses dying. Eleanor sat beside him, silent, just there. "I lost it," Ben said. "All of it. You saved us. That's what matters. The horses. I heard them screaming and I couldn't reach them. I couldn't save them." His voice broke. Tears came. Not the quiet, dignified tears of a man in control. The ugly, choking sobs of someone who'd been holding everything together for too long and finally cracked. Eleanor put her arms around him and held on while he fell apart. He didn't know how long he cried. Minutes, hours, time lost meaning. Eventually the tears stopped. The shaking subsided. He was empty, hollowed out, but somehow lighter for it. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be. I'm supposed to be strong. For them. You are strong. This is what strong looks like, feeling it and surviving anyway." Ben looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman he'd known for less than 2 weeks, who'd been through hell and somehow still had the strength to hold someone else together. "Thank you," he said. Morning came too soon and too slow. Ben sat with Sarah and Eleanor in the kitchen while his daughters slept in the back bedroom. Coffee steamed in chipped mugs. The smell of bacon cooking should have been comforting, but just reminded him of the meals he'd never cook in his own kitchen again. Sarah knew about Victor Hartwell, knew more than Ben had expected. "Had a girl come through here last year," Sarah said. "Escaped from one of Hartwell's establishments in Denver. She didn't last long. Consumption took her within a month. But before she died, she told me things." "What kind of things?" "The kind that would make a jury hang him. If we had a jury that would listen. But Hartwell owns Sheriff Pike, owns lawmen in 3 other towns. He's built himself a network." Ben's hands tightened around his coffee mug. "I know. I tried to take it down once, 5 years ago in Kentucky." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "You're that Benjamin Wright. Marshall Hayes mentioned you in a letter. You know Will Hayes. We correspond about situations like this. Women who need help, men who need stopping." Sarah leaned forward. "Ben, I'm going to be straight with you. Hartwell won't stop, not until he has Eleanor or you're dead. Probably both." "I know. You can't fight him here, not with 5 daughters to protect, not against 6 or 8 professional gunfighters." "What are you suggesting?" "Prospect Valley, settlement about 100 miles west. New community, maybe 50 families. They're building something different out there. Fair laws, honest justice. Started by a man named Pastor James Miller." Ben considered this. 100 miles in winter with 5 children. But staying meant Tom Hartwell coming back. Staying meant his daughters in the line of fire. "It's not running," Sarah said, reading his thoughts. "It's tactical retreat. You go to Prospect Valley, you gather allies, you build a force Hartwell can't match. Then you come back and finish this properly." Tactical retreat. The phrase resonated. This was strategy, not cowardice. "Can you send word to Marshall Hayes? Tell him where we're headed." "I'll send a rider today." Ben looked at Eleanor, saw the question in her eyes. "We go to Prospect Valley," he said. "But we're not running. We're regrouping, building strength. When we come back, it'll be with enough force to end this permanently." Sarah provided supplies. Food blankets, medical supplies. A 4th horse on loan. Warm clothes for the girls. Ammunition that Ben accepted with grim gratitude. They left before dawn while darkness still held. The journey west was everything Ben had feared and worse. The first 2 days were manageable. Cold, but bearable. They followed old mining roads that cut through prairie and foothills. The girls bore it well, wrapped in blankets singing songs Catherine had taught them to pass the time. Ben taught Eleanor to shoot during their first night's camp, set up tin cans as targets, showed her how to hold the rifle, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling. She missed the first 5 shots. Her hands shook. Her breathing was wrong, but she kept trying. "Again," Ben said patiently. On the 6th shot, she hit a can. The metallic ping echoed across the empty prairie. Eleanor's face lit up with fierce satisfaction. "Good," Ben said. "Now do it 9 more times until it's muscle memory." Charlotte watched from nearby. After Eleanor went to help Maggie with dinner, Charlotte approached her father. "You're teaching her to fight." "I'm teaching her to protect herself." "Do you love her?" The question caught Ben off guard. "Charlotte, I don't know that it's appropriate to discuss." "It's okay if you do, Papa. Mama would want you to be happy." Ben's throat tightened. 11 years old and already so wise. "I don't know what I feel yet," he admitted. "But she's family now, and we protect family." Charlotte nodded, satisfied with that answer. On the 3rd day the snowstorm hit. It came fast and brutal. Visibility dropped to feet. Wind howled. Temperature plummeted. Ben found an abandoned mining shack more through luck than skill, got everyone inside before the worst of it hit. They huddled together for warmth. 7 people in a space meant for 3. The cold was vicious. The wind found every crack in the walls. At 3 in the morning, Ben heard movement outside. He grabbed his rifle, moved to the door, heart pounding, ready for Tom Hartwell's men, just a deer, spooked by the storm, looking for shelter like them. But the moment of fear reminded Ben that they weren't safe, that Tom could be tracking them even now, that they might not see him coming until it was too late. Rose woke crying from the cold. Ben held her, shared his warmth. "Papa, I'm cold." "I know, sweetheart. Morning will be warmer." "Will we be safe in the valley?" "Yes, I promise." The lie tasted bitter. He couldn't promise safety, could only promise he'd try. The next days blurred together. Rocky terrain that forced them to walk the horses. One horse went lame on day 5, a tendon strain that meant someone had to walk. Ben and Eleanor took turns carrying Rose. During one of these walks, Eleanor spoke. "You're exhausted." "I'm fine." "You haven't slept properly in days. Let me take watch tonight." "No, that's my job." "It's our family now. You said so yourself." "Let me help." Ben looked at her, saw the determination, the strength she'd built over the past week. "Okay, we split watches, but you wake me at any sign of trouble." "Deal." That night Eleanor took the first watch. Ben actually slept. Real sleep, not the half-aware dozing he'd been managing. When she woke him at midnight, her face was serious but calm. "All quiet. Your daughters are safe." "Our daughters," he corrected. Her breath caught. The word "our" hung between them, heavy with meaning. On day 6, Ben's deputy training saved their lives. He was scouting ahead, leaving Eleanor with the girls 100 yards back. Something felt wrong. The birds were too quiet, fresh tracks in the snow, broken branches. His instincts screamed trap. Ben signaled Eleanor with hand signs they'd established. She saw, stopped, kept the girls quiet. He worked his way forward carefully, found 3 men camped near the road, Tom's men, waiting in ambush. They'd somehow gotten ahead, predicted the route. Ben's mind worked fast. Couldn't fight with the girls nearby. Couldn't go forward into the trap. Only option was detour. He found an animal trail. Rougher terrain but safer. Led his family around the ambush, moving quiet and careful. It took 4 extra hours. But they lived. Later Eleanor asked, "How did you know?" "Birds, tracks, experience. 12 years as a deputy teaches you to read danger." "Thank God for that." "Thank Catherine. She's the one who made me value life over pride." Day 7 brought the river. Water rushed fast despite the cold. Ice chunks floated downstream. The crossing looked dangerous but necessary. No other route for miles. Ben assessed the situation. Water was chest deep at the ford. Current strong enough to knock a person down, but crossable, barely. Eleanor volunteered to go first. "Let me test it. If something happens to you, those girls need their father." Ben's every instinct said no, said protect her, said he should go first because that's what men did. But her logic was sound, and he was trying to treat her as an equal, not a child. "Rope yourself to the saddle. If you go under, the horse pulls you out." Eleanor tied the rope around her waist, mounted the horse, walked it into the water. The current hit harder than expected. The horse struggled. Halfway across it stumbled. Eleanor fell. Ben's heart stopped. She surfaced, gasping, rope holding. But the horse was panicking, pulling her under. The rope that was supposed to save her was drowning her. Ben didn't think. Ran into the river, swam for her. The cold was shocking. The current fought him, but he reached her, cut the rope with his knife, grabbed her. Both went under. On the bank his daughters screamed, all 5 of them watching their father disappear beneath dark water. Ben surfaced, Eleanor in his arms, swam for shore. The current tried to take them downstream, but he fought. 12 years of law enforcement had kept him fit. Adrenaline gave him strength. He reached the bank, pulled Eleanor out. She was blue, shaking violently, hypothermic. "Stay with me," he commanded. "Eleanor, stay with me." Maggie brought blankets. Ben stripped Eleanor's wet clothes with clinical efficiency, wrapped her in every dry blanket they had, held her against his chest, sharing body heat. All 5 daughters gathered around, shared their warmth. A family cocoon against death. Slowly Eleanor warmed. 30 minutes of terror, then her eyes focused, her breathing steadied. "Sorry," she whispered through chattering teeth. Ben's fear transformed into anger. "What were you thinking? You could have died." The knot failed. He checked the rope. She was right. Frayed. Broke under pressure. His anger deflated. "I'm sorry. I just can't lose anyone else. I can't." "I know." They camped on the east bank that night. Didn't risk another crossing in darkness. Ben watched Eleanor sleep, terrified she'd stop breathing. That hypothermia would take her after all. Maggie approached quietly. "You love her, don't you, Papa?" Ben looked at his eldest daughter. Couldn't lie to her. "I think I might. Mama would want you to tell her. When the time's right. Promise. Promise." The next morning they crossed successfully, one at a time, careful, slow. All 7 made it safely to the western bank. On day 8, they reached Prospect Valley. The settlement appeared in afternoon light, smaller than Ben had expected, maybe 40 buildings, but organized, clean, people working together with obvious purpose. A man walked out to meet them, tall, silver hair, kind eyes that held steel underneath. "Travelers, you look like you've had a hard journey." "That's putting it mildly," Ben said. "Are you Pastor James Miller?" "I am, and you are Benjamin Wright. These are my daughters, and this is Eleanor Grace." Miller's eyes assessed them, saw exhaustion, fear, determination. "You're running from something." "Someone. Victor Hartwell." Miller's face hardened. "I know that name. Then you know what he is." "I do." Miller stepped forward. "Prospect Valley was founded for people like you, people hurt by men who think money makes them gods. You're welcome here, all of you." Eleanor's voice was small. "Just like that. Just like that. That's what we do here." The cabin they were shown sat at the settlement's edge, small, 2 rooms, needed repair, but solid, safe. Rose ran through it, delighted. "Can I have the corner by the window?" The other girls explored with obvious relief. First real shelter in 8 days. Ben stood in the main room, Eleanor beside him. For a moment neither spoke. Then Eleanor turned to him. "We made it." "We did." "Ben, I need to tell you something." His heart pounded. He knew what was coming. "These past 8 days, everything we've been through, I've realized something." She took his hand. "I love you. I love your daughters. I love this family we're becoming." Ben couldn't speak, could only cup her face in his hands and kiss her. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deeper. 3 years of loneliness ending, a new beginning. When they pulled back, both were crying. "I love you too," Ben said. "Have since that cage, was just too scared to admit it." "Scared of what?" "Losing you. Like I lost Catherine. I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "Promise." From the doorway came giggling, all 5 daughters watching. "They kissed," Rose announced unnecessarily. Maggie smiled. About time. The next weeks in Prospect Valley brought cautious peace. Ben helped build a schoolhouse with other men, repaired their cabin, got to know the community. Eleanor taught sewing to settlement women, helped at the school, made friends. The girls thrived. Maggie caught the attention of Daniel Foster, the blacksmith's 15-year-old son. Charlotte finally relaxed. Dorothy drew constantly. Alice devoured books. Rose made friends with every child in town. Most people welcomed them, shared food, labor, kindness. Sunday services included them without question. But not everyone was friendly. Jacob Turner, a middle-aged farmer, spoke against them at the community meeting. "We don't have resources for every outsider who wanders in." Pastor Miller called for a vote. Overwhelming majority said yes, the rights could stay. Jacob was outvoted but clearly resentful. Ben noticed the way Jacob watched Eleanor, the hostility in his body language. This man was a problem. 3 weeks after their arrival, Pastor Miller came to their cabin. His face was grave. "There are men asking about you in Cedar Ridge, 20 miles east." Ben's blood ran cold. "Hartwell. Reports say 6 men, led by someone named Tom." "How long?" "Days, maybe less." After Miller left, Eleanor spoke. "I should leave. Draw them away." "No. These people don't deserve what's coming. These people get to choose. They chose to welcome us. Now we see if they choose to fight." Miller had already positioned himself. "The settlement will vote, but my position is clear. We protect our own." Ben met with the able-bodied men. Robert Foster, the blacksmith. Dr. Hayes, the young physician. 12 farmers who'd never fought anything more dangerous than coyotes. Ben assessed their capabilities with the deputy's eye. "We have numbers but not skill. We need strategy, defensive positions. We can't meet them in open combat." He planned using everything he'd learned: crossfire zones, escape routes, resource allocation. Eleanor coordinated with the women: safe rooms, medical supplies, children's evacuation plans. That night Ben checked his rifle alone, thought about what was coming. The weight of leadership pressed heavy. "Catherine, if you can hear me, help me do this right." On the 3rd night after the warning, Ben saw Jacob Turner ride east at 2 in the morning. Furtive, secretive, gone for hours. Ben's instincts screamed betrayal, but he had no proof, just suspicion. When Jacob returned at dawn, Ben confronted him. Early morning ride. Jacob was defensive. "Checking traps. Long way to go for rabbits." "What are you implying?" "Nothing. Just observing." The tension was thick enough to cut. Ben told Eleanor his suspicions. They agreed to assume Jacob had given Tom Hartwell their full defensive plan. Changed positions, revised strategy, prepared as if betrayed. On the 4th day, Tom Hartwell arrived. 6 riders approached from the east at noon. Tom dismounted first, scanned the settlement with professional eyes, spotted the defensive positions despite attempts to hide them. He smiled. Ben stood in the main street with 15 armed men spread through surrounding buildings. Eleanor behind him, Pastor Miller at his side. Tom's voice carried. "Benjamin Wright, my brother sends his regards." "Your brother can rot in hell." "Probably will, but first he wants what belongs to him." Tom's eyes found Eleanor. "Hello, Eleanor. Been a long time." Eleanor stepped forward. "I'm not going back." "Not your choice, sweetheart." "I'm a free woman. Ben has papers." Tom laughed. "Papers? My brother owns judges. Your papers are worthless." Ben intervened. "She stays, with her family." "Family?" Tom's laugh was cruel. "You've known her, 3 weeks? You're fucking her and calling it family." Ben's rage flared. "Watch your mouth." Tom's smile widened. "Here's how this works. You have until sundown. Bring Eleanor Grace to the eastern edge. We ride out. Your town lives. And if we refuse, then we burn every building, kill anyone who resists. Take her anyway." Tom gestured at the settlement. "These people have families, children. You willing to sacrifice them for one woman? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Fear, doubt. Then Jacob Turner stepped forward. From the crowd, joining Tom's men, gasps, shock, betrayal confirmed. "I told you, Miller," Jacob said. "I told you they'd bring trouble." His wife Emma appeared from the church basement, face horrified. "Jacob, what are you doing?" "What I have to protect this town." Jacob turned to the crowd. "Give them what they want. Save yourselves." Ben's voice cut through. "You're a coward and a traitor, Turner." "I'm a realist. These men will kill us all." Then Emma Turner did something unexpected. She walked away from her husband, stood with the townspeople. "Don't you dare speak for me, Jacob Turner. I didn't marry a coward, but I'm looking at one now." Jacob stared, shocked, his own wife choosing the side of strangers over him. Emma looked at Ben and Eleanor. "I stand with you." The effect cascaded. Robert Foster stepped forward. "I stand with them." Martha Green, the store owner. "My sister died in Hartwell's establishments. I stand." Dr. Hayes. "I took an oath to protect life. I stand." One by one, people declared support. Not everyone. Some held back. But enough. More than enough. Tom Hartwell watched his ultimatum crumble, realized this wouldn't be the easy victory he'd expected. "You're making a mistake, right?" "Then it's my mistake to make." Tom's face went cold. "Sundown. Last chance. After that, blood is on your hands." He and his men rode to the eastern edge, waited, watched. Jacob Turner went with them, choosing greed and fear over community. The town erupted in chaos, some celebrating courage, some terrified, some questioning if they'd made the right choice. Pastor Miller called everyone to the church. Inside, Ben would make his stand, would convince farmers to become fighters, would turn a community into an army. Because Tom Hartwell was waiting. And sunset was coming fast. The clock was ticking. The storm was gathering. And Benjamin Wright, for the first time in 3 years, was exactly where he needed to be, standing between evil and the people he loved, ready to fight, ready to win or die trying, but absolutely, completely, utterly alive. The church was packed, 53 people crammed into a space meant for 30, families with children, single men, widows, all of them looking at Ben with expressions ranging from hope to terror. Pastor Miller stood at the front, but everyone knew this was Ben's moment. This was his fight, his call to make. Ben walked to the front of the church. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded. 12 years as a deputy had taught him how to command a room, but this was different. These weren't fellow lawmen. These were farmers being asked to become soldiers. "I won't lie to you," he began. His voice carried to the back of the room. "Tom Hartwell and his men are professional killers. We're farmers and shopkeepers. They have experience. We have numbers. They have skill. We have something more important. Motivation." He paused. Let that sink in. "They're fighting for money. For a paycheck from Victor Hartwell. We're fighting for home, for family, for the right to live free from men who think they can own other human beings." Martha Green spoke up. "How do we fight them? Most of us have never shot at anything but rabbits. We don't meet them in open combat. We'd lose." Ben moved to a crude map Pastor Miller had drawn. "We use defensive positions, buildings for cover, create crossfire zones, make them come to us where we have advantage." He outlined his plan with the precision of a man who'd done this before. Positions assigned, fields of fire calculated, escape routes marked. Women and children go to the church basement, medical supplies already stored there. "Dr. Hayes, you'll coordinate with your wife on triage." "What about casualties?" Robert Foster asked. The question everyone was thinking. Ben's face was grim. "There will be casualties, on both sides. War isn't clean. People will die. I need you to understand that before you commit." Silence fell over the church. Heavy. Suffocating. Then a voice from the back. "Better to die standing than live kneeling." It was Emma Turner, Jacob's wife, the woman whose husband had betrayed them all. "My husband chose fear," she said, standing. "Chose to protect himself over doing what's right. I won't make that choice. I stand with you." The dam broke. One voice became many. "I stand. We stand. For Prospect Valley." Ben felt something crack open in his chest. Not quite hope, but something close. "Then let's prepare," he said. "We've got 5 hours until sunset." The preparation was organized chaos. Men spread through the settlement taking positions Ben had assigned. Women gathered children and supplies. Dr. Hayes set up a makeshift hospital in the church basement. Ben walked through it all, checking positions, offering encouragement, making last-minute adjustments. He found Eleanor helping with the children. Rose clung to her dress, not wanting to let go. "I'm scared, Mama," Rose said. The word Mama came naturally now. Eleanor knelt, bringing herself to eye level. "So am I, sweetheart. But your papa is the bravest man I know, and he won't let anything happen to us." Rose looked at Ben. "Promise?" Ben knelt beside them. "I promise I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe, all of you." Maggie appeared with her sisters. All 5 gathered around their father. "Papa," Maggie said, her voice trembling despite her attempt at bravery. "I'm scared." "So am I, sweetheart." The honesty seemed to help. Ben pulled all 5 daughters into an embrace. "I need you to be brave," he said. "Not for me, for each other. Maggie, you're in charge if something happens to me and Eleanor. Can you do that?" At 13, Maggie looked far too young for such responsibility, but she nodded. "Yes, Papa." Ben looked at each daughter. Charlotte fierce and protective. Dorothy quiet but observant. Alice smart beyond her years. Rose still innocent but learning courage. "I love you," he said. "All of you. Never forget that." They went to the basement. Ben watched them go, wondering if he'd ever see them again. Eleanor stayed behind. "I'm fighting," she said before he could argue. "Eleanor, they want me. I'm not hiding while others die for me. You taught me to shoot. Now let me use it." Ben saw the determination in her eyes, the same look she'd had when she'd volunteered to cross the river first. "You stay with me, where I can see you." "Deal." The sun crawled toward the western mountains. Each minute felt like an hour. Ben positioned himself on the main street with a clear view of the eastern approach. Eleanor beside him, Robert Foster to his left, Dr. Hayes in the church tower with a rifle. At 5 minutes before sunset, Tom Hartwell and his men rode in slowly. They spread out. Professional formation. These men knew what they were doing. Tom dismounted, walked forward until he was 30 feet from Ben. "Last chance, right. Send out the woman." "Come and take her." Tom's smile was cold. "Your funeral." He didn't charge. That would have been stupid. Instead, his men spread out and started shooting fire arrows into buildings. The strategy was clear. Create chaos. Force people out of cover. Pick them off in the confusion. 3 buildings caught fire on the eastern edge. Townspeople scrambled to extinguish the flames. In the distraction, Tom's men advanced. Gunfire erupted. Ben's first shot took down one of Tom's men. Not a kill shot, but enough to take him out of the fight. The man went down screaming, clutching his leg. From the church tower, Dr. Hayes fired. Another of Tom's men dropped. But the townspeople were taking casualties too. Paul Green, Martha's husband, took a bullet to the chest, went down hard, didn't get back up. The sight of real death rippled through the defenders. Some wavered. "Hold!" Ben shouted. "Don't break formation." Robert Foster took a shot to the leg, went down cursing. His son Daniel, 15 years old and terrified, dragged his father to safety. Then Daniel picked up the rifle. The boy's hands shook. But he took his father's position. The battle intensified. Fire spread. Smoke filled the air. Bullets cracked through wood and glass. Ben moved between positions, shooting, directing, encouraging. A bullet grazed his shoulder. Pain flared, but he kept moving, kept fighting. Eleanor proved herself, saw one of Tom's men sneaking toward the church where the children hid. Her hands trembled as she raised the rifle. "Breathe," she whispered to herself, remembering Ben's lessons. "Aim, Squeeze. She fired. Hit the man in the leg. He went down. Eleanor stared at her hands, shocked that she'd actually done it. Ben saw, felt pride and fear in equal measure. The battle reached a crisis point. 3 townspeople dead, 5 seriously wounded. But Tom's men were suffering too. 2 dead, 2 wounded. The problem was that Tom and his core fighters were still fresh, still dangerous. Tom made his push, coordinated advance, trying to break the defensive line. Ben saw it happening, saw his carefully constructed defense about to collapse. He made a decision. The kind of decision that was either brilliant or suicidal. He broke from cover, ran toward Tom's position, drew all the fire onto himself. "Hartwell," he shouted, "face me like a man instead of hiding behind hired guns." Tom's face twisted, pride and rage warring. He couldn't resist the challenge. The 2 men faced each other in the middle of the street. Around them the battle continued. But in that moment it came down to this. 2 men, 1 fight. Tom spoke first. "Trying to be a hero, right? Your wife died because you failed. You'll die the same way." The mention of Catherine ignited something in Ben. Not just rage, clarity. He charged. Years of deputy work had kept him fit. He knew how to fight, how to use his weight and momentum. The tackle took Tom by surprise. Both men went down hard. The fight was brutal. No rules, no mercy. Fists and elbows and anything that worked. Tom was younger, stronger, but Ben was more desperate, fighting for everything that mattered. Tom got the upper hand, pinned Ben, started beating his face with heavy fists. Ben felt his nose break, tasted blood, his vision blurred, but through the haze he saw Eleanor. She had a rifle, a clear shot at Tom, but the men were tangled together, moving. One wrong move and she'd hit Ben instead. Eleanor's hands shook, the rifle wavered, her breath came too fast. She remembered Ben's lessons, remembered the hours of practice, remembered why she was here, not just to be saved, but to save. Tom pulled a knife, raised it over Ben's chest. "Say hello to your wife for me." For half a second the men separated, Tom rising for the killing blow. Eleanor's world narrowed to that moment, the rifle sight, Tom's chest, the squeeze of the trigger. She fired. The bullet took Tom in the chest, not instantly fatal, but close. He staggered backward, looking down at the spreading blood with something like surprise. Ben scrambled for his gun. Tom reached for his. Ben was faster. A single shot to Tom Hartwell's heart. Tom fell, dead, before he hit the ground. The battlefield went silent. Tom's remaining men saw their leader dead. 2 fled immediately. 1 threw down his weapon and surrendered. Jacob Turner, who'd been hanging back the entire fight, rode off with the fleeing men. The battle was over. Ben tried to stand. His legs wouldn't cooperate. Eleanor was there helping him up. Her face was white. She was shaking. "You shot him," Ben said. "I had to. I couldn't lose you." "You saved me." "We saved each other." Around them the settlement emerged from cover. The count began. 3 dead. Paul Green, farmer Samuel Reed, and young William Hayes, Dr. Hayes's cousin. 7 wounded, 2 seriously. Of Tom's men, 4 dead, including Tom. 1 captured. 2 fled with Jacob Turner. The victory felt hollow. The cost too high. Martha Green knelt beside her husband's body. Her grief was silent, contained, but her eyes held an emptiness that Ben recognized. He'd seen it in the mirror for 3 years. Ben approached her. Didn't know what to say. What words could possibly help? Martha looked up. "Thank you." The words caught him off guard. For what? Paul died protecting something he believed in. That has meaning. That matters. Her voice broke slightly. Don't carry guilt for this. Carry gratitude that men like Paul exist. Ben nodded, throat too tight to speak. The cleanup began. Bodies to be buried. Fires to be extinguished. Wounded to be treated. Ben collapsed on the church steps. The adrenaline was wearing off. Everything hurt. His face was a mess of blood and bruises. His shoulder burned where the bullet had grazed him. Eleanor sat beside him. Neither spoke, just sat in the aftermath. His daughters emerged from the basement. All 5 rushed to him. He held them while they cried, relief and fear and trauma all mixed together. "You came back," Maggie whispered. "I promised." That night the town held vigil for the dead. Pastor Miller led prayers. People shared memories. Grief was acknowledged, honored, given space. Ben stood at the back holding Eleanor's hand, watching his daughters process their first real encounter with mortality. This was the cost of standing, of fighting, of choosing right over easy, and it hurt like hell. The next morning brought unexpected salvation. A rider approached from the west, federal marshal badge gleaming in morning light. William Hayes, Ben's old partner, the man he'd worked with in Kentucky, the friend he'd abandoned when Catherine died. Hayes dismounted, took one look at Ben's battered face and shook his head. "Jesus, Ben, you look like hell." "Feel like it too." Hayes surveyed the settlement, saw the burned buildings, the fresh graves, the wounded. His face went grim. "Got Sarah Fletcher's message, rode through the night, but looks like I'm late. By about 12 hours. You fought them off, with farmers. They're not just farmers, they're people protecting home." Hayes pulled papers from his saddlebag, official documents, federal warrants. "Victor Hartwell was arrested in Denver 2 days ago. My team raided his establishments, freed 31 women. Evidence is overwhelming. Trafficking, fraud, abuse. With Tom dead, the case is even stronger." Eleanor's knees buckled. Ben caught her. "It's over," she whispered. "Really over." Hayes nodded. "Your contract with Hartwell is void. Officially. He's going to prison for minimum 20 years. You're free, ma'am. Legally, completely, permanently." Eleanor couldn't speak, just cried into Ben's chest while he held her. Hayes pulled Ben aside. "I need statements. Yours and Eleanor's. For the trial." "You'll have them." And Ben, "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner. Could have prevented." He gestured toward the graves. "You were doing your job. So were we." Hayes stayed 2 days, took statements, took custody of the captured man, made everything official. Before he left, he spoke with Ben one last time. "The territory could use men like you, if you ever want to pin on a badge again." Ben looked at his daughters playing in the yard, at Eleanor helping Martha Green with something, at the community rebuilding together. "I'm done with badges, Will. I've got a family to raise." "Fair enough." Hayes extended his hand. "But if you change your mind." "I won't." They shook. Old partners, mutual respect. Hayes rode out, taking the captured man and Tom's body with him. Ben watched him go and felt a weight lift. The past was finally truly settled. The weeks after the battle were hard. The dead were mourned. The wounded healed slowly. The burned buildings were rebuilt with community effort. Eleanor struggled most. She'd killed a man, even a man like Tom Hartwell. The act weighed on her. She had nightmares. Ben held her through them. "Does it get easier?" she asked one night. Ben was honest. "No, but you learn to live with it. The weight becomes part of you." "How do you bear it?" "By remembering why I did it, who I protected." 1 month after the battle, life had found a new rhythm. The community was stronger for what they'd endured. Bonds forged in fire. Emma Turner filed for divorce from Jacob. He'd never returned. Word came through travelers that he'd fled the territory entirely. Emma became close friends with Eleanor, 2 women who'd chosen courage over fear. Martha Green channeled her grief into work. Her store became a community hub, a place where people gathered and remembered and healed together. Daniel Foster asked permission to court Maggie. Ben's first instinct was to say no. She was only 13, too young. But Eleanor reminded him gently that courtship wasn't marriage, just getting to know each other, with supervision, with respect. Ben agreed, with rules, strict rules, chaperoned visits, always. Daniel proved himself worthy, polite, hard-working, clearly smitten but respectful. Watching them together made Ben feel old. One evening, 6 weeks after the battle, Ben and Eleanor sat on their porch. The cabin was repaired. The community rebuilt. Life moved forward. "Eleanor," Ben said, I need to tell you something." She looked at him curious. "I spent 3 years existing, not living, going through motions. Then I saw you in that cage and something woke up inside me." He took her hands. "You've made this house a home, given my daughters a mother's love, given me a reason to wake up each day." He pulled her to her feet. "I know it's soon. We've only known each other 2 months, but I also know that life is short and uncertain. I don't want to waste another day." He knelt. Eleanor's breath caught. "Eleanor Grace, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my daughter's mother?" Tears streamed down her face. "Yes, God, yes." The kiss was deep and full of promise. Years of loneliness ending. A new beginning. From the window, 5 daughters watched and cheered. The wedding was 6 weeks later in early spring. The first warm day after the snow melted, the entire settlement helped prepare. Women sewed Eleanor's dress. Men built an arbor. Children picked wildflowers. Martha Green baked a 3-tier cake. The ceremony was held outdoors under blue sky. Eleanor walked alone down the makeshift aisle. Her choice. She was giving herself, not being given away. Ben waited at the arbor with his daughters, all 5 in new dresses the community had made, all 5 grinning. When Ben saw Eleanor, his breath caught. Simple dress, wild flowers in her hair, but beautiful, radiant. "Catherine," he thought, "I hope you're watching. I hope you approve." Pastor Miller officiated. When it came time for vows, Ben spoke first. "Eleanor, I found you in the darkest moment of your life, but you saved me from the darkness of mine. I was a ghost for 3 years. You made me alive again." His voice roughened with emotion. "I promise to love you fiercely, protect you always, honor you daily. I promise to be the husband you deserve and the father our daughters need. Whatever comes, we face together." Eleanor's turn. She was crying, but her voice was steady. "Ben, you saw me when I was invisible. You fought for me when I'd given up fighting. You gave me a family when I had nothing." She looked at the 5 girls standing beside him. "I promise to love you and our daughters with everything I am. I promise to stand beside you in all battles. I promise to make this house a home full of love. And I promise to spend every day being worthy of the gift you've given me. By the power vested in me," Pastor Miller said, "I pronounce you husband and wife. Ben, kiss your bride." The kiss was tender, deep, full of hope. The crowd cheered. The daughters rushed forward. A group hug at the altar. Rose shouted, "Mama and Papa!" The reception lasted until sunset. Dancing, food, celebration. Daniel Foster danced with Maggie, both of them blushing. Charlotte relaxed enough to laugh. Dorothy sketched everything. Alice asked 100 questions. Rose was everywhere at once. Ben danced with each daughter, save the last dance for Eleanor. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever dreamed possible." "Me too." As sunset painted the sky orange and gold, Ben looked around, at his family, at the community that had fought beside him, at the life he'd built from ashes. Catherine would be proud, he thought, and for the first time thinking that didn't hurt. It just felt true. 18 months passed. Ben turned 40. The milestone hit harder than he'd expected. Gray hair that used to be streaks was now dominant. His body ached in the mornings from old wounds that never quite healed. The burns on his hands from trying to save the horses had left permanent scars. He was aging, faster than he'd like. Eleanor was 8 months pregnant. The baby kicked constantly. They didn't know if it was a boy or girl. Didn't matter. They'd love it either way. But Ben thought about numbers. He'd be nearly 60 when this child graduated school, might not live to see grandchildren. The thought terrified him. Early one autumn morning he sat on the porch alone, coffee steaming, watching sunrise paint the mountains gold. The hollow place in his chest wasn't empty anymore. It was full of purpose and love and life, but it was also heavy with the weight of mortality, the knowledge that time was limited. Eleanor joined him, moving slowly with her pregnant belly. "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. Want to talk about it?" Ben was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm 40. I'll be nearly 60 when this baby graduates school. What if something happens to me? What if I don't see this child grow up?" Eleanor took his hand. "Then we make every moment count. That's all anyone can do." "Catherine died at 35. Life is so fragile." "It is. Which is why we don't waste it worrying about what might happen. We live it while we have it." Ben looked at his wife, pregnant with his child, strong and brave and everything he never expected to find again. "You're right. I usually am." He laughed. She made him laugh. That was worth everything. Breakfast was chaos. 7 people around the table, soon to be 8. Maggie helping cook, now 15, and looking so much like Catherine it sometimes hurt. Charlotte working with the horses, growing into a skilled rancher. Dorothy's art gaining recognition beyond the settlement. Alice deep in medical texts, determined to be a doctor despite everyone saying girls couldn't. Rose at 7, still innocent, but growing fast. Ben watched it all, memorized it. This was legacy, not land or money, but children who were kind, brave, strong. A letter arrived that morning from Marshall Hayes. Victor Hartwell had been convicted. 25 years in prison, his entire network dismantled. 53 women freed in total. Eleanor read the letter with tears streaming down her face. "It's really over. All of it." Ben held her. "It is. You're free. We all are." That Sunday the whole family attended service. Ben sat with Eleanor and 5 daughters. Noticed things he'd have missed before. Emma Turner thriving, independent and strong. Martha Green running a successful business. Honoring her husband's memory by living fully. Dr. Hayes training Alice informally. Seeing potential the world said didn't exist. Daniel Foster, now 17, sitting respectfully 2 rows behind Maggie, waiting patiently to court her properly when she was old enough. The whole community grown and strong. We built this, Ben thought, together. After service, Daniel approached. "Mr. Wright, may I speak with you?" Ben's stomach dropped. He knew what was coming. "Walk with me." They walked to the edge of the settlement. Daniel was nervous, hands shaking slightly. "Sir, I know Maggie is only 15, and I'm just 17. I'm not asking to marry her now, but I wanted to make my intentions known. I care about her, deeply, and when she's old enough, when we're both ready, I'd like to court her properly, with your blessing." Ben studied the boy. Good family, hard worker, respectful, kind eyes. "My daughter's happiness matters more than anything. You understand that?" "Yes, sir." "Hurt her, and you answer to me." "I would never, sir." Ben saw himself at 17, seeing Catherine for the first time, knowing instantly she was the one. "You have my permission to court her, when she's 16, with rules, chaperoned visits, respect, always." Daniel's face lit up. "Thank you, sir. You won't regret it." Ben watched him run off to tell Maggie, watched his eldest daughter's face light up with joy. She's growing up, he thought. They all are. Soon they won't need me. That was both painful and exactly what should happen. That night, Eleanor went into labor. It started with contractions around 10, gentle at first, then stronger. Dr. Hayes was summoned. The house became organized chaos. Ben paced outside the bedroom, could hear Eleanor's pain through the door, wanted to help, couldn't do anything but wait. The girls waited with him, all 5 awake despite the late hour. At 3 in the morning, Maggie spoke. "She'll be fine, Papa." "I know, but waiting is torture." At dawn, a baby's cry cut through the house. Dr. Hayes emerged smiling. "Healthy boy, mother's doing well." Ben rushed in. Eleanor lay exhausted but beaming. In her arms, a tiny bundle, Ben's son. He took the baby carefully, felt the weight of new life, this child who would carry his name into the future. Tears came, silent but real. "What should we name him?" Eleanor asked. Ben thought about the people who'd shaped this journey. "James, after Pastor Miller." "James Benjamin Wright." Perfect. The daughters met their brother one by one. Rose was fascinated, Alice clinical in her observation. Dorothy already sketching, Charlotte protective, Maggie natural like she'd been preparing for this her whole life. Holding his son Ben felt the weight of mortality more sharply. He'd be 58 when James was 18, might not live to see him marry, have children. But he had him now. That was enough. 1 week later, Ben sat on the porch at night. Stars filled the sky. Catherine's star shone bright. Baby James slept against his chest. Eleanor beside him, head on his shoulder. Inside, 5 daughters visible through the window. Maggie helping Charlotte with homework. Dorothy drawing. Alice reading. Rose playing with dolls. His family, all of them. Ben thought about the journey that had brought him here. From that cage in Dust Creek to this porch in Prospect Valley. From broken widower to father of 6. From dying inside to fully, completely alive. "What are you thinking?" Eleanor asked. "That I'm the luckiest man alive. Even with all the scars, all the pain. Because of them, they brought me here, to you, to this." He looked at the baby in his arms, at the woman beside him, at the children inside. 2 years ago I thought my life was over, that the best part of me died with Catherine. I was just going through motions. He paused. Then I saw you in that cage, and something woke up. I don't know how much time I have left. 40 feels old. My body reminds me every morning that I'm not young anymore. Eleanor squeezed his hand. "But I know this," Ben continued. "I'm not just existing anymore. I'm living, really living. And that's Catherine's final gift to me, the promise I made her, to keep living." "You've kept that promise." "I finally have." They sat in comfortable silence. Baby James stirred, made small sounds, settled again. The hollow place in Ben's chest wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of love and purpose and the particular joy of a man who'd lost everything and found it again in unexpected places. He thought about legacy. About what he'd leave behind when his time came. Not a ranch, not money, not even his name on buildings or monuments, but 6 children who knew how to stand for what's right, who understood that kindness isn't weakness, who'd learned from watching their father that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing, a wife who'd survived hell and chose to live anyway, who'd turned pain into strength and fear into courage, a community that understood the true cost of freedom, that knew justice sometimes requires sacrifice. That was legacy. That was enough. The stars wheeled overhead. Catherine's star burned bright among them. And Ben Wright, 40 years old and feeling every day of it, held his infant son and thought about the strange, beautiful path that had brought him here. From deputy sheriff to broken widower to savior to husband to father again. From a cage in Dust Creek to a porch in Prospect Valley. From death to life. The journey had cost him. Burns on his hands, scars on his soul, gray in his hair and aches in his bones. But it had given him everything that mattered. Eleanor kissed his cheek. "I love you." "I love you too." Inside, one of the girls laughed. Baby James made a small sound. The night was peaceful. And Benjamin Wright, for the first time in years, looked toward the future without fear. Not because he didn't understand mortality, but because he'd learned something more important. That a life well lived isn't measured in years. It's measured in moments like this. In children raised and loves found and stands taken when it would have been easier to walk away. Catherine had asked him to keep living. He finally was. And somewhere among the stars, he liked to think she was smiling.